Okay, so we're recording and going to kick off. So thank you very much, Stephen, for joining us today, agreeing to be the first guest for the Data Freelance Hub Freelancer Stories. Really good to have you on the call and to chat through the experiences. So the format of the call is going to be very much just a conversation between yourself and myself, chatting about all things data freelancing, your journey with data freelancing, how you got into it, like how you first got started with data, basically everything around data freelancing. And hopefully people on the school will find it interesting. They can use it as part of their journey to becoming a data freelancer, or to leveling up their data freelance offering. So again, thank you very much for joining.
Pleasure.
I guess to get started, a good question would be probably to wind it back actually before you started data freelancing. So I was going through your LinkedIn before this call and saw you actually spent some considerable time at National Trust.
Yeah.
Do you want to take us through that from when you first started? Did you start off in data? Did you start off in a different role? Like, how did you get into data in the first place?
Well, going back even before National Trust. So I did biology at university, and whilst that doesn't seem like it would be the most data heavy subject, actually in the final year of biology I did almost all maths related subjects. So biomechanics, parasitology, which is about modeling of behaviors of populations of parasites, mammal biology, which again is about, a lot of it is to do with modeling populations of animals, and evolutionary genetics as well. And lots of genetics is about understanding maths and how probability of certain genes might kind of carry on. So did that, and then all I wanted to do after university was go traveling. So I everything was kind of focused on that. But once I'd kind of done that, and I'd been away, been in Australia, been in various Southeast Asian countries for a while, I came back and was looking for a job, and I ended up working at HSBC Life alongside the actuaries, doing the kind of the insurance, the modeling around insurance and predicting death a lot of the time in terms of what that's all about. So I started using data there, and that kind of led on to another role where I was also kind of using data. I went traveling again, but then came back, and having worked for HSBC, whilst it was a great experience, I wanted to either work for a small company where I could make a real difference, or if I was going to work for a large company, it had to be one that I really believed in. And then the opportunity came up at the National Trust. I've got fond memories. So for anyone listening to this at any point in the future, National Trust is an organisation in the UK. It's Europe's largest conservation charity. It looks after probably about 300 pay for entry properties in the UK that are maintained and kept forever for everyone, is the mantra. There's 600 or 700 miles of coastline around the UK, and it's probably about the fourth biggest landowner in the whole of the UK. So it looks after a lot of stuff for the nation, and it was an organisation I'd been brought up visiting places as I was young. So a role came up to do, what was the first role? It was working alongside the marketing department, doing data analysis, but related to marketing and list orders and targeting of members for promotional material, or looking for people who might be interested in donating money to the National Trust. Because whilst it's not a company, it's not a corporation, it's a charity, it's still, when you're in a role like that in a charity, it's still all about how can I make money to support what the organization's doing. So I found myself working for the National Trust, and that started off in an analyst role.
Do you remember your initial tech stack when you first got started there?
Okay, good question. So when I first joined, I don't know whether it was you or me, but one of us got Google talking. Anyway,
okay.
When I first joined, they were using FastStats, and they were literally just in the process of changing CRM systems. So changing the CRM system at the time, we were moving away from FastStats. CRM system was being done by one of the consultancies, and in terms of the tech that went alongside that, it certainly wasn't Tableau then. I think we were doing lots of the analysis in Access, Excel, VBA, and a few other tools that went on, and SPSS as well. So the now IBM owned statistical package.
Okay, nice. And was it a big team, a small team? Like I imagine, you know, like marketing analytics have really taken off in like the last sort of 5 to 10 years. So imagine just before that, it might have been.
I think there were maybe 5 or 6 of us then.
Okay. Like,
yes, it was a decent number, and I went in. I started off as a senior analyst in the team, and then obviously things change in large organizations. So I went from that role to, and because it's a large organization, so there's like 4,000 or 5,000 people, regular staff, maybe even more than that now, but 4,000 or 5,000 people regular staff, and then they take on another, say, 8,000 volunteers regular, like for the season, but they I think 50 or 60,000 volunteers in total used across the organization, or involved across the organization, I should say. It means that there's lots of opportunities. So I went from that initial role as an analyst to then having an opportunity to work across the whole kind of marketing, and it was called marketing and supported development at the time, but to work across the whole of that directorate with the director, helping plan all of the activity. And then I went from that role into a senior management role in IT, where I was responsible for all of the business intelligence across the trust, and also all of the data protection as well, all of the information security stuff. So was working obviously very closely with IT teams who were controlling the information security stuff, and also the business in terms of the data that they needed. But got to a point where I realized that that managerial thing, whilst it was a great experience and I wouldn't take it back, I wouldn't change what I did, it's if you get the opportunity to do it, anyone who's considering a career in analytics, if you get the opportunity to do it, it's a great experience to understand what people want. But all I wanted to do was like dig into the data and understand it and do the doing. So an opportunity came up to join the data science team, so I did that.
So you started off in marketing analytics, and then you worked your way up and went into sort of more senior management roles, working across IT, and then you actually sort of. Well, would you say you took a step down to come into like the data science team? Like from like, what was it like?
It was a step down. Absolutely, was a step down.
Okay,
it was a lower grade, but I got to the point where through various things I decided it was what I preferred doing. And I think I before that I'd always been of the opinion that I could kind of do anything, and that anytime there was any opportunity for further responsibility, I was always there, like, yeah, I can do it, yeah, I can do it, yeah, I can do it. But I ended up in that role, and whilst it was a great experience, it was probably the one role I've had where I was really like didn't enjoy all of the things I was doing, because it didn't play to my strengths. I think my strengths are talking to people, understanding what they need, looking at data, digging into data, understanding what's going on with data, and then playing that back to people to help them understand it. Whereas in that role, all I was really doing was going from meeting to meeting to meeting, talking about what other people were doing, but really secretly inside wishing I was doing that instead.
And do you think from like a stakeholder management perspective, going into that management position is really what gave you the edge, or do you think you kind of naturally had those skills before going into the management position?
I think I was always all right. I was always pretty good at communication. But what those more senior roles gave me was a better ability to kind of step back and think, okay, if I was them, if I was doing their role, what would I want? What would I need? What? Because a lot of the time, and I see the frustration in other people, other colleagues I've had in the past, and also in myself before I did those roles, the frustration of, they're asking me for this, but they haven't told me everything that they want. surely they can think this through better. You know, these requirements are dreadful. Why haven't they told me more about what they need? But having done those roles, I think I'm much better now at thinking, well, okay, they haven't got time for that. They've got numerous competing demands for their time, and actually if what I can do is help them by saying, okay, I've understood what you're asking for, now let me think about, against the data that's available, let me think about what might be most helpful to you. And by doing that, by taking on that role, I'm saving them time, I'm freeing up their time to do other things. And I think that's the edge, that's the thing that I think makes a difference, because everyone wants stuff that's going to make things easier for them, don't they?
Yeah.
And so that, I think, is a key part of the role.
I definitely think it's quite an interesting perspective, like having started doing like the, actually in the data, doing the analytics, then going up to the management position, and then transitioning back actually into more of the doing and into the analytics. I think, yeah, provides you some unique insight that perhaps other people wouldn't necessarily have. With your data science role, like your senior data scientist role, like in what capacity were you doing that? Was that within marketing analytics still? Was that broader across the trust?
It was mostly still in marketing capacity. So a lot of what I was focusing on was National Trust membership, the churn and retention that related to membership, because as an organization, it's their largest income stream, but also some stuff that related to donations. But when it came around to things like COVID, obviously everyone was kind of doing everything. So at that point, I was helping set up data streams in from a booking system through APIs into processing the data, into connecting it up with wherever the latest restrictions were across the country, to then feed that information out to the rest of the organization. But that was a great experience, because I also got to work with the then CEO of the Open Data Institute, who, because it was really hard to find data at the time on exactly where those restrictions were. So we worked together to bring that data into one place where we could share it publicly, but also so that I could do the things that I needed to do in the National Trust. Because whilst the government were, and obviously had a hard job at the time, the data, when you need specifics that was coming out, wasn't always brilliant. So we were trying to fill that gap.
Okay, and you said at the beginning you started off using like Excel, VBA, SPSS. When you got, what was this, like 15 years later, as you worked up to the senior data scientist role?
Probably 10 years later.
10 years later.
At that point, and it came at a brilliant time for me. So I was at the National Trust for 18 years in total, and it wouldn't have been that. I love the organization. It's an amazing organization. Anyone listening to this ever in the future, if you get the opportunity to work for the National Trust, and it's just a lovely organization to work for, really great. But I like doing a job for a while, and then I will get to a point where I'm ready for the next challenge. But because the National Trust is quite a big organization, that next challenge was always fulfilled by an opportunity that came up. So I got to the point of that senior IT management role that I was doing. I knew I was ready for change. I knew then, because I'd done quite a lot of soul searching, and I knew that I was wanting to get back into the analytics. But whereas a lot of the stuff that I'd done when I joined the trust was more, if you think of a spectrum of going from reporting over at this end of the scale all the way through to predictive and prescriptive analytics at this end of the scale, I knew whilst we'd always been doing a lot of that stuff, I wanted to get more into this. And so I was looking outside the trust at that point for opportunities. But then the National Trust went through a change program, and one of the things that came out of it was a data science team. And I knew that people within the trust would know that I could do that analytics stuff, and that it would be a much easier sale for me, because at the end of the day, it's all about how we sell ourselves, isn't it, for the next role that we want to do. It's not all about that, but it's an important part. So I knew that it would be a much easier sale for me to say, yeah, I know I've been doing this managerial role, but I can do this, and I want to do this, and so I jumped at that opportunity. Whereas to tell that story outside of the trust would have been a bit more difficult, who knows? I don't know how difficult it would have been, because I didn't try, because the opportunity came up in the trust. But yeah, so opportunity came up and I jumped at it.
So in terms of your your training then in the data science area, so you started off, and I'm guessing they trained you up in the marketing analytics side of things, and then
Yeah.
later on when it came to learning the skills that you needed to be a data scientist within the trust, is that something that they invested in like internally? Like did they?
Well, so yes and no. So yes, in that we had tools. I'll come back to that. But the going back to the degree I did and the interest in stuff that I had. So a part of the degree and math stuff before that was all about statistics. So a lot of maths in biology is statistical type maths. We did sections of the course with MSOR. So what's that? Mathematical Statistical Organizational Research, is it, or something else? Whatever that stands for, operational research. So we did sections of that. So I had that background anyway in statistics, and I guess coming out of that, and I look back and I can't see how I didn't make the connection, but it just wasn't as big a thing then, that this stuff can be applied so effectively in businesses, and you don't need to do it a lot of the time. You don't need to do it in a cutting edge way. I saw the CTO of CERN once talk about data science and talk about what they were doing with the Hadron Collider, and that really is cutting edge. But a lot of the time, certainly from my experience in business, you can take a load of stuff that's been done in science in the past and apply it in a business setting, and it will work as long as you're applying the right thing and you have the right data. So I was able to take that background, but then when we were starting up the data science team, the tools that were picked at the time were Alteryx for a lot of the data stuff. The decisions behind Alteryx was because we could ramp up really quickly. There were various tools that through the selection process we knew we couldn't use, and there was a person in the team who could have used another tool to do some of the statistical modeling, like churn models that we needed to do, but we couldn't use that tool. So we set about finding something that we could use quickly, we could ramp up quickly. It didn't have the learning curve of something like R or Python, which is why we went with Alteryx at the time. And also you can integrate it with R and Python should you want to down the track, and Tableau as well. And we worked with an amazing business partner for Tableau and the Alteryx implementation. And so we used those things, and a big chunk of it, and this will be familiar with any organization doing it, a big chunk of the first year or two was, right, let's sort our data, let's get our data into a position where we can actually do something with it. And then off the back of that, we did various things with either just fairly bog standard analysis so that we could give people data and insight so that they could take action, or models that we could track, or whatever. But it was all about being pragmatic and trying to work with the business to give them the answers to the questions that they had.
So in terms of the tech stack then that you were using at that point, it was Alteryx, Tableau, a little bit of Python, a little bit of R as well?
A little bit of Python, a little bit of R where we needed to. There were a couple of things where we had to do time series analysis, some econometrics, and one of my colleagues used a specific tool for that. I can't for the life of me remember what that tool was called. But in terms of in the background, there was an Amazon Redshift database, and the CRM system at the time was an Oracle CRM system. So that was feeding into Redshift. We were then doing the stuff that we needed with the data in Redshift. Some of that would sit in the Alteryx server because we used an Alteryx server for the work that we were doing. And then the results of all of that would go through into the Tableau server. And that was where people accessed, like people in the business, that's where they would access the dashboards or the analytics that they needed, the report that they needed.
And how many years were you doing that role in the senior data scientist role at the National Trust?
Oh, you're testing me how well I know my own CV now. Probably about 8, 9 years, 10 years maybe.
Okay.
But I can't quite remember. So it went from a senior data analyst role to then working with, after COVID, I was working with this specific team that do all of the membership retention and loyalty, because again, as I say, that's like the main income stream, or not the main income stream, but the largest income stream. So COVID brought about some changes of team structures and stuff. So it kind of one role melded into another, but that kind of time period in total.
So in terms of kind of where you really learn, the different data tools, different data processes, how you work with data, kind of how you work with clients, that was done very much like within the National Trust. That's kind of like where where you developed the skills that you needed to eventually go out and work for yourself as a freelancer.
Yeah, absolutely. So the business partner that we had, the Tableau partner we had, an Alteryx partner we had, I will mention them because they're an awesome company, the Information Lab, so I've worked with them closely over the years. They were our partner helping us implement stuff into the trust. But the other thing that we had access to through them was training. And we used a few of they run a data school, which some people may be familiar with. So we had some of their people placed with us over the years. And as well as the training we had direct from the Information Lab, having those people in-house who had been trained by some of the best in the industry meant that they could bring that training into the trust and help disseminate it across the analysts that needed it. Because it wasn't just me at the end, it wasn't just me and others looking at the marketing customer data. There were also a whole team of finance analysts looking at all of the financial data, and they were using Alteryx and Tableau as well for that. There was another team looking at the people, the HR data, and kind of using the tools to do that as well, and others looking at the commercial data, so retail and the food and beverage type stuff, and holiday cottages, and all of the other things that make up the National Trust as a whole in terms of the organisation that it is.
So sort of looking forward now to kind of the transition to becoming a data freelancer. So you're at the National Trust for 19 years. You were doing working as a data scientist then for roughly around 8 years, towards the end of your tenure at National Trust.
Yeah.
What was it that made you think, okay, I'm interested now, potentially sort of branching out and doing this on my own? Like, what was that? Was it like a point in time? Was it like a spark, like a moment, or was it something that gradually happened over time? Like, how did that happen for you?
I had been thinking about, because I knew that I'd built up quite a lot of skills over the years. I've worked across the kind of the data pipeline, from the more data engineering, but not the really kind of hardcore data engineering, but certainly I need to get data out of this system, that system. I need to connect with those APIs. I need to pull all of this together to do something that works for people in a business. I've done that. Pull data through. I had the managerial experience with the information security and with the kind of BI as a whole, and also lots of experience doing the data visualization stuff, specifically in Tableau at that time. But more recently, it's been lots of Power BI stuff as well. Because I had all of that experience, I had been thinking about trying to go contracting for a long time, but I was on a 3-month notice period at the National Trust, which is fairly standard, and having responsibilities. So I'm married, I've got kids, I've got a dog, all of these, a house, mortgage, whatever, all of those things cost money, and I am quite risk averse. So thinking of just and knowing that, or having the perception that to get a contract role, I would have to be available to do a contract role. So I was like, well, I'm going to have to resign and then just play out my notice period and hope that a contract comes up. That just wasn't going to play for me, and conversations with my wife as well. It just wouldn't have been a position that I was comfortable with. But then through COVID, kind of half the organization was furloughed. Those that were left, we were working hard. We were doing all sorts of work and trying to set up stuff to deal with this new environment that we found ourselves in. All of a sudden having to set up this booking system, all of a sudden having to set up things that just weren't there before, and with less resource. I worked really hard during that period, but my wife happened to be on the way home from work one day, and she heard an interview with the CEO of People Per Hour, one of the many freelance platforms that there are. And looking back, I'm kind of like, I've been thinking about contracting for such a long time, years, in fact, and there was always this barrier in the way of doing it. but I never thought of translating that into something that could be more short term or more manageable to transition over to. And I think back and I think, why didn't I think of that? But even if I had, I'm not sure I'd have done anything with it. But anyway, so there's a number of these platforms now where businesses can go on and look for services of people. These are businesses that often don't want to commit to a 3-month or a 6-month or a 12-month contract. They don't want to, they can't commit budget wise to paying for someone, but they have a specific piece of work that they need doing, and they need a skill set that it would take someone in the business a long time to learn, but they just need a piece of work done. So what People Per Hour and other freelance platforms enable is for those companies to advertise these pieces of work, and for then freelancers like me, like you, like anyone else who's got a specific set of skills to look at these things and say, yeah, I can do that, and so this is what I can do for you. So my wife happened to hear this interview, and she told me about it, and I was like, oh, okay, that sounds interesting. So I'd just been working really hard over COVID and came to the conclusion that, yes, National Trust is an organization I love, great, but if I do lots and lots of overtime, I'd rather do it to get paid, because working for charity, you tend not to get that, which is fine. It's part and parcel of it. But so I decided that if I was doing overtime, I wanted to get some kind of reward for it. So one of the really important things to me, and I am honest and conscientious and all of those things, that I might get you to take that out later, because that's like, yeah. Anyway, but I am. I won't really. I'm joking. But I am. So it was really important to me that I went to my employers. I checked my contract, and I think that's a really important thing for anyone who's looking to do freelance alongside their existing job, which is what I was then immediately thinking about. Check your contract, check what it says. All mine said was, you can do other work, but you have to get permission from your line manager. I had a lovely line manager, and had a chat with her, and she said, yeah, that's fine, obviously, as long as, and I was already making the point that this will not affect the work that I need to do for you. Obviously, I'm going to prioritize that, but I want to dip my toe in the water with this freelance stuff as well. And we can come back to that going well, but that did go well after a few months. And so then I agreed with work to step down to 3 days a week. So it meant that I still had 3 days a week of work for the National Trust, and therefore pay for the National Trust. But I was then doing freelance work alongside that. And then eventually that got to the point where it was still too much. I was working all hours and through the weekend and whatever. So February of this year, November of last year, I handed my notice in, and February of this year, I went full-time freelancing, just as the market bombed. But I'm sure there's loads of questions there, so go for it.
So just winding backwards, so you went and you spoke to your manager and you said, is it okay if I do freelancing alongside my permanent job? Did you then do it like I heard you went to 3 days a week, but I missed a bit there. Was there a period of time where you were doing 5 days a week for National Trust, but then doing the freelancing in the evenings and on the weekend?
Yeah, that's right. So five days a week National Trust, and then the evenings. By the time I went to 3 days a week, it was literally 5 days a week National Trust, and then I was doing every evening and both days at the weekend freelancing. And if I look back at that time, financially it was great, but lifestyle wise, obviously it's not sustainable. And so myself and my wife were having lots of conversations about how sustainable this is, and it wasn't. So then I dropped to 3 days a week, and then the freelancing ramped up more. And so having dropped days for the National Trust, because the freelancing then ramped up even more, and I was doing stuff to try and kind of win business at that point, so it was partly what I was doing, but yeah, because that happened, it got back to the stage where, yes, I was only doing 3 days a week, but I'm still working most evenings and both days of the weekend. And so my wife is still saying to me, this still isn't working, is it?
Yeah.
And it wasn't, and I knew it wasn't. It wasn't sustainable. I was working too much.
So your first projects that you started taking on, like in the evenings and the weekend, did you find that work through people per hour initially, or did
Yeah,
it come through a different source? Okay.
no, initially, absolutely people per hour. So if I think back to when that was, I think it was November 20. Yeah, I think it was. And so I looked at, so my wife heard this radio interview. I looked at people per hour. I looked at others as well. So, worth mentioning, there are others. I've got a list of them so I wouldn't forget. So Freelancer, Upwork, Fiverr, The Work Crowd, Molt, Juno. The two that I've had quite a bit of work through are people per hour and Juno. I think lots of people do get decent work through the likes of Upwork, but it looked to me like it was quite a saturated market when I first looked at it. In terms of the other people that were on there, I've been connected with the Tableau community and the Alteryx community, but more so the Tableau community for a long time. And all I had to do was look through some of the names, and I thought, oh, they're there, oh, they're there, oh, they're there. I'll struggle to get work kind of against them. So I was looking at people per hour and thinking, there's a space here for me. So I think that's quite important as well.
I was going to ask you that, like why people per hour, but I think you summarized it there quite nicely. Effectively, you looked at it and you saw potentially lower competition was still a good number of roles. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, definitely fair to say. I think at the start there were a good number of roles. I think there's a few less at the moment, but that's a market thing.
Yeah.
But at the start there were enough roles for me to go after. Yeah, and enough space for me to be able to win roles without there being too much competition. So Upwork, there were a couple of the Tableau visionaries that I knew of, or they were Zen masters back then, but they were on Upwork, and I could see that, because I've never bothered with that sort of route. I haven't looked for that kind of I don't know what's the word, like certification almost. It's a type of certification, isn't it? I've not gone down that route of trying to get those things. So I knew that it would be more of a struggle to justify that, yeah, absolutely, I can do that work against some of those people. So when I looked at people per hour, not only did they have work or roles that I could see that I could help with, but there was less competition on there to go up against.
So how did you win your first role? So like a lot of people say, go onto these platforms and, particularly Upwork, they say it for, I go on there, but, I don't have any experience. I don't have, any history built up on the platform. Like I can't win anything. I imagine, people per hour, although there's less competition, it must be pretty similar in some sense. So how did you stand out when you first got onto the platform? Like, why did people pick you with, no reviews and no previous history compared to the other data freelancers that were on there?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think I was lucky to a certain degree, but lucky that I had the thought that I had, and it didn't come from anywhere else other than me just thinking, well, I'll just do this then. So to explain that, when I first looked at people per hour and other platforms as well, I saw that there's lots of people on there already. There's plenty of people on there bidding for work from other countries as well, other countries with lower cost of living than we have in the UK. So the rates that people are bidding are lower than I can bid for work to kind of justify doing it. And that's fine. No complaint whatsoever from me on that front. It's an open market and everyone is welcome to kind of bid whatever they want to. So I was looking at it thinking, well, why would they kind of want me to do it at a higher rate than someone elsewhere in another country? But actually it transpired when talking to people that even though we've moved to this world of remote work, actually quite often people they just want to know that if they do want to get you into a meeting room, they can. And so I think that was part of it. But right back at the beginning, I was looking at the roles that were being advertised, thinking, I'm never going to get a role here because, there's all of these people and look, they've got great experience. And how am I ever going to win a role against them? But then a few things came up where I was reading it and it was like, I can't remember the exact examples, but it was the kind of thing you'd see on a Tableau forum or on an analytics forum, where someone is just saying, how do I've done this chart and I just want to change this line so it's a bit thicker, and I want to change the color, or really simple basic stuff.
Yeah.
That I'm thinking, if they posted that on any forum anywhere, they'd have 30 or 40 people falling over themselves to give them an answer for nothing. So for those examples that I saw, my proposal back, so the job gets posted and you see it as a job and you say, yeah, okay, I've got the skills for that. You have a read of whatever they've written. And when it was something like that, right at the beginning, where I had no reviews, I had nothing, I'd go back to them with something along the lines of, hi, I'd just really plain English. No, don't use technical language. A lot of the time, the people who are asking the questions aren't from a technical background, but they're trying to get past some kind of technical problem they've got. So plain language, really important. Hi, I'd love to help you with this, but you could get the answer for free if you go here, there, or wherever. But if you want help with this here, I can help you, and I'll charge you the absolute minimum I can charge you. But all I would ask from you is a review.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I look back and think about that and think, is that a bit manipulative? But it worked at the beginning, and I think probably the first 3 or 4 reviews were from doing that sort of thing. And I had some lovely conversations with people who, the data community as a whole is so giving and so sharing and so nice. And I've had so many people help me over my career with answers to technical questions, that I'm usually very happy to help people with answers to technical questions for nothing. So I was kind of saying to these people, you're in the wrong place, but I can help you with this, and if you want me to, then just pay me a really small fee. It was like £10 or $10 or something, and give me a good review, and we're all good from there on in.
So in terms of like an initial time commitment at the beginning, because I know a lot of people go on there and they think, well, I don't really want to be doing work for free to build up my reputation. Like, that's going to take a lot of time. So it sounds like you picked, kind of questions
small, or tiny
jobs, that like they sound like quite low hanging fruit. Are we talking like an hour here or there, or are we talking like days, weeks? Like what are we talking?
No, not days, weeks. We're not talking big pieces of work. We're talking small questions, really, things that I could point them in the right direction for, and answer their questions. Some of them were more complicated, like how do I improve the efficiency of this workbook? And I had one where someone had actually agreed to pay me an amount, but the answer to their question was so simple that I gave them the answer, and then they left and then ghosted me entirely because they didn't even want to pay me that small amount, which was fine. It's okay. It was just, it was a learning point for me to not give the answers out before I've actually, got an official agreement, whatever. But no, they were small, they were tiny, and what actually really they were, for the most part, were just really interesting, nice conversations with people that I wouldn't have chatted to otherwise.
Okay, nice. So you started off, you got the the 3 or 4 small projects, you build up your reviews, started to build your reputation. Did you find then, winning work on the platform was easier after that? Like, did work start coming to you? Did you still have to practically go out and get it? So work started coming to you once you built up the reputation. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I probably only had maybe 6 or 7 reviews by the time that work started to come to me. The best one was a client that I still have, an absolutely lovely professional services company up in Warwick, and they're based in London as well. And they came to me to do a piece of work in Tableau, and we looked at everything that we had, everything they had, and we ended up doing it in Power BI instead, because everything that they had was Microsoft, and their whole tech stack was Microsoft. And also, whilst I love Tableau, they didn't need the creative flexibility that Tableau gives you. They just wanted kind of reporting, bog standard reporting, and it made sense to use Power BI. And what was lovely about that was, because I'd been through that process with them, again, I think I was really lucky, but but maybe it came from helping them through their issues, finding a solution for them, and being very honest with them.
Building that trust.
Yeah, build the trust, absolutely. So I said to them at the point where we decided that Power BI was the right way to go, I said to them, look, you know, I've done years and years of report design and whatever, obviously, but I haven't done Power BI. So I'll help you find someone else.
Yeah.
But they said to me at that point, actually, do you think you can learn it? And I was like, well, yeah, I can learn it, but I haven't done it before. And they said, well, actually, if you can learn it, you do it. And I was just, wow, that's, thank you. So I agreed with them that any significant learning I did for the Power BI front, and I think once you've learned, you know, data visualization, best practices, and all of that stuff, you know it. It doesn't matter what the tool is. The tool is just the fluff on top of the data, and always the hardest, most important thing is that you get the data structures right and get the data sorted, and the tool that you use is then the fluff on top. But they gave me that opportunity to learn it, and I agreed with them that if I was doing any significant learning, that would be in my own time. Okay. And then the building and the development would obviously be me charging them, and they're still a client now. And I only do like a few hours a month for them because everything's kind of built and there now, and they've got for the moment what they need. But yeah, it's great. So that was brilliant. They came along, and then a couple of others came along after them saying, oh, I can see you can do this. And yeah, it went from there.
It is interesting because, you know, normally one of the things that people speak about with data freelancing or contracting is that your skill set stagnates. And I think in the majority of cases that can be true unless you're doing kind of learning outside of that. But it's interesting actually that, you know, you build up this relationship with the client, and then that enabled you to actually then transition into a role that enabled you to kind of upskill and learn like while you're doing it. And did you say afterwards then that actually then led to work in Power BI for you?
Yeah. So I've done loads of other work in Power, not just Power BI, but also like the Power Platform, so Power Automate, Power Apps, other elements of that kind of Microsoft stack that work really well together. And all of it really has stemmed from that. So whilst, you know, I know that I see stuff where people are suggesting, you know, you really specialize in a particular tool and you get to know everything about a particular tool, and I can see the benefit in doing that. But what I've done is kind of almost not deliberately, but learn about data strategy, learn about information security, learn about the visualization best practices, learn about data modeling, all of those things that you kind of ideally need to understand to be able to do data stuff. But at times, specifically in a tool, but also so that I can kind of pull back from that and apply it across different tools and understand what's good and what isn't.
So you got your fundamentals there, you got your underpinning, you built like a solid foundation, and off the back of that, you've been able to kind of put other tools on top of that solid foundation and offer that as a service. Would you say when you be going out like speaking to clients, you know, are you selling more like I can do Power BI? Or are you selling more like, you know, I know all of these fundamentals? Like how do you position yourself as like a tools guy, a fundamentals guy, a combination of both? Like what's working for you?
Yeah, I can do that. That's maybe a little bit blasé. I think no. So if it's a specific role, so tablet, I'm not going to try and sell myself to do, like I say, authenticity, honesty, I think are really important. So if someone asks me to do, what did I get asked to do? It was a particular data science role that I was asked to do, and I was just like, well, it's just not stuff I've done. So, you know, I don't feel comfortable saying to you that I can do it. So yeah, so it wasn't a role that I did. So I think authenticity is important. The Tableau stuff, the Alteryx stuff, some of the R, Python, you know, I've got years of experience of that stuff, and also the data strategy that sits behind it and the information security that sits behind it, years of experience of that. So if it's a specific role around any of those things, and also the kind of the CRM systems that we're implementing at the trust, and working alongside those with the data and how you get the data out and what you do to analyze it. Absolutely, I can always answer from a very honest perspective of, yeah, absolutely, got years and years of experience with that. When it comes to the Power BI stuff, I tend to couch it more in the way of saying, I've been using that for 3 years, which is absolutely true. But I've also got 10 years of data visualization best practice experience and blah, blah, blah. So I think it's important to be very honest about what you do know and what you don't. But as you'll know, it's not like it was when I started working, where, you know, back at HSBC, when we were doing everything with Access and Visual Basic, and it was Visual Basic 6, so it wasn't even VBA stuff, it was Visual Basic. And the main way you got answers to any questions that you had was open up the big book that you had at the side of your desk and try to flip through and find the bit that kind of gave you half the answer and another bit in the book that gave you another half the answer. Now, as long as you understand those fundamentals, and you also then know how to ask either Google or ChatGPT now or whatever the question in the right way, invariably you can get the answer that helps you solve whatever problem is in front of you, as long as you've got that overall understanding. So I think it just, if you've got the experience, if you've got the skills, it gives a lot of confidence that you've now got this like amazing, massive helping hand behind you. Even Google on its own was incredible, but it's even better now.
So at the moment, are you mainly doing Power BI projects? Are you doing like kind of, what's your, you know, like at the moment, like where are you focusing? Is it Power BI? Is it Tableau? Is it data visualization in general? Like what are you looking at?
So at the moment, I'm conscious that I think we should step back to the proposals slightly, because there's something on that I think is important to cover. But if I answer this for a second, so at the moment I'm carrying on with some data. I think one of the best things about freelancing for me has been the variety of the roles that I've done. So I've worked across multiple industries now, and you know, you see these job adverts for you must have experience in pharmaceuticals, or must have experience in this or that or the other, and I feel so much more confident now in saying, well, no, I think what you need to have is knowledge and experience of working with data, and ability to listen to your subject matter experts and understand what they're saying about their data. But as long as you can then do that and interpret it and work with the data, it's kind of the some fields will matter, but most doesn't. You can just kind of work with it. So I think it's been great for that variety. But what I'm working on currently is still a variety. So one of the roles I'm doing is very much more towards the managerial end of the scale. So looking at a CRM system implementation and how we use the inbuilt functionality of that alongside the Tableau and Alteryx licenses that they already have. Another one is ongoing work with Power BI. I'm working with a startup in America who are doing research across the American public to sell into some of the big research agencies and the kind of agencies that predict stock market movements and stuff like that. So I'm working with them to visualize their data in an appealing manner, which then enables them to sell it into those people. So lots of other stuff going on, but it's
super varied.
It's amazing. It's great. And so I can be doing something, you know, at one end of the scale, it's all about strategy and what team and resources needed. At the other end of the scale, it's about how pretty can I make this data look to make it sellable.
And should we go back to the proposal?
Yeah,
we just paused on. So
So just briefly on the proposal then. So back to people per hour and any other platform like that. So these roles come up and get advertised, and obviously as a freelancer you can look at the roles that are there, and what you need to do then is to put in a proposal to say, this is how I'll set about doing the work for you. I'm kind of back in a business setting. I think, you know, you might see those as request for what would they be, RFP or whatever they're called, a request for RFQ, request for quote, isn't it? Or other things like that. And so you build up this document and there's loads of information in there. And what I've realized, or what I've found works for me, is rather than all that detail, actually a lot of the time when people put the stuff on these, I need this help, there isn't a lot of information there. And so what I found to be effective for me, and I could be shooting myself in the foot by telling other people, but what I found to be effective for me is to just go back with a proposal that says something along the lines of, using very positive language, I'd love to help you with this. I've got these skills that mean that I can help you with this. It would be great to talk more, because obviously, you know, we need more information to come up with a decent quote for you in terms of what it will take to do. But let's chat about it. And if you want to give me a call, here's my number. If you want to send me an invite for a meeting, here's my email address. We'll do everything. So whatever the platform is, I also feel really strongly that they have made the connection. So I'm not going to try and go off site to get paid outside.
Yeah.
The payment goes through the platform, because I wouldn't have that connection if it wasn't for them. And I think that comes back to the honesty and the authenticity part. But absolutely communicate outside, because sometimes those platforms, the communication within isn't that great. They're great for connecting you, but there's such good communication platforms around that, you know, make the most of those. So let's have a chat, and then we can, you know, and from there, then you're into, okay, now we're developing the relationship. We're working out whether you want to work with me or whether you don't want to work with me, but we're having a conversation about it, rather than being a completely faceless person at the other end of the scale. And I find that my success rate in terms of winning roles, once I get to the point of being able to have a chat with someone, is good, because I'm asking them questions about what they want, what they need, and responding to that and trying to be as flexible as I can.
And do you find that you submit like a personalized cover letter for each of the roles that you're going for, or do you kind of have like a templated version?
It tends to be specific to each, but as I say, it's not even, because it's like, you know, you see on the screen this description of what they're asking for, and the box for the proposal is only like yay big, and you can write loads. But actually, I've found I've been more effective when I've almost written less, and just unless they're asking for something really specific and they give loads of detail, and then you can give a proper estimate. Most of the time, there isn't enough detail there to be able to estimate the work, to be able to estimate the work anyway. And so I just say, I'd love to help you with this. I've definitely got the skills, maybe not quite in that language, but I'd love to help you with this. I've been doing visual analytics for 10 years, or I've been doing data science stuff for 10 years, or, you know, whatever the accurate statement is that goes to the skills that they're looking for. So I've been doing this, but let's chat about it, because, you know, there's obviously lots of stuff we need to understand to be able to give you a proper estimate for what this work will take. And then the conversation doesn't always happen, you know, so I'll get blanked and get no responses back, and that's fine.
It's normal. Yeah,
it's normal, absolutely normal. That's okay. But you will tend to, I find, get responses back to that kind of open invite for conversation that I try to give.
awesome. I'm conscious of time, but there's two questions. One for myself, and then there's one from the chat channel. Outside of people per hour, are there any other ways? Do you work alongside recruiters? Like, so you have your people per hour route, but like, how else are you winning work?
So also, you know, Juno is the other one that I've got quite a bit of work through, but there are other freelance channels. But absolutely, recruiters, don't underestimate the power of recruiters being able to help you find work. Identify the people who are recruiting in the area that you want to work in, either the industry you want to work in, or the school, the tools and skill set that you want to use. Identify them, contact them, befriend them, invite them for a conversation, have a chat, get to know them, let them get to know what skills you've got that will make it, because at the end of the day with recruiters, it's about what can I do to make it easy for them to fill a role. The more you can do to make it easy for them to fill a role, because you've got those skills, the more likely they are to put you forward for it. And the other thing I know I talked about this as kind of an offshoot, but there are big organizations like consultancies that are obviously doing projects all of the time. So I have had some productive conversations with consultancies as well about working with them and helping them fill roles when they don't have internal resource to do it themselves.
You said something really interesting there, which was talking about like the relationship with recruiters. So I think traditionally, like the thought process is like, how can this person help me? And actually, I
Yeah,
think if you flip the script and you turn around and say
absolutely.
like,
Yeah,
how can I help them? How can I make their job easier?
yeah.
You know, like that's how you become top of mind with recruiters. You know, when the time comes when they're looking for a role.
But you know what? You've hit the nail on the head there, because that's absolutely what I try and do with the conversation with clients as well. So if I flip that whole conversation into how can I make their role easy, or how can I give them the stuff, what do they need to do their job, then I'm not only thinking about what have they asked me for, but I'm thinking about what else can I do to give them stuff that lets them hit their objectives, that lets them meet their whatever it is, sales targets they need to do or whatever. If I can do that, then they're going to want to work with me again.
Yeah, I like that. I like that as a, like a, what do you call it? Not a thought process to live by, like a way to live and to do work, however you want to call it.
My
Yeah.
raison d'etre.
There you go. That's a better way of saying it.
Yeah, don't quote me on that. Honestly, I'm blushing already.
We do have one question from the chat channel here, and I actually think it's
Yeah,
quite a good one to end on.
yeah.
So it basically asks you, what's the ultimate goal? So is it freelancing? Is it having your own consultancy? Because at some point you're going to start turning down jobs as your capacity will be stretched. So
Yeah.
what do you want to do with this?
And I have done already. I don't want to run a consultancy. I've come across a few people already that I think, yeah, you're good, you're really good, and so there are, and I would have to have worked with people directly to recommend them for work and to know that they're really good. But I don't have any burning desire to head up a consultancy or anything. I think there's a lot of administration and overhead, and inevitably you end up in the business politics and stuff. I love the freelancing because I'm kind of separated from the internal politics of an organization. I can go in, I can do a job, I can give them my opinion. If they want to listen to it, they can keep me on for longer. If they don't, then I move off onto something else. And so I love that. And so I don't feel the need to step too much back into working for an organization for that reason. So the end goal for me is just keep learning, keep doing different freelancing roles, keep the variety going. I love it. And keep connecting with the community, because one thing I've loved since really getting into the data stuff is how interested and excited other people get in data, because it's really hard to explain to anyone that isn't interested in data that you can go to some conference in LA where there'll be 20,000 people whooping and hollering for people doing analysis on stage. Yeah, I love that. It's great. It's good to be able to share that with people.
Nice. So, it's not about, how can I scale this and how can I make multi-millions a year? It's about freelancing because it works for your lifestyle. It gives you an interesting variety of clients. It allows you to do the type of work that you're actually interested in, which is getting into doing the analysis and not worrying about the politics, not worrying about the overhead and the other stuff that comes with it.
Yeah. And ideally, it's getting to the point of having that work-life balance. And I'd still, I've talked about going from working for an organization and freelancing alongside to then freelancing. The market did drop and it was hard to get work for a while. It appears to be picking up again now. And at the moment I've got quite a lot on, and so I still haven't got that work-life balance thing right, but that's my end goal. Decent work-life balance, enough money to live on and have a reasonable life. That's it, really. I think you can work too much.
Yeah, I think that's a lovely analogy, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think we might have one more question. Let me just see.
Okay.
Nope. We just crushed somebody's dreams of having a joint agency between the three of us. So.
Oh really? Well, give me the right offer, maybe.
All good.
Never say never is also another really important thing.
Well, Stephen, thank you very much for that. It was a super interesting session. It was great to hear, your story of how you, first started out in data, kind of how you've done different roles within that, from, working your way up from marketing analytics into management into a senior data scientist role, and kind of how you transitioned on a part-time capacity into freelancing, and then ultimately how you kind of branched out and gone full-time freelancing, and how you've won the majority of your work, the struggles that you faced, and some really good top tips in there in terms of how to apply for roles, how to build those relationships as well. And I think above all, like how to do it with like honesty and transparency. So thank you very much. And yeah, anything else you'd like to add? Now is your time.
No, pleasure anytime, and well done for setting up the Data Freelance Hub, because I think it's awesome, and keep going with the work that you're doing. It's great.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And thank you everyone for joining the call. We'll look to do more of these in the near future. If there's anybody you'd like me to try and get hold of and see if I can persuade them to come and be as kind of Stephen did with their time and have a chat with me, let me know, and I'll look to prioritize it. But yeah, thank you everyone. Thank you very much again, Stephen, for your time.
Cheers, Ash. See you soon.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.